Harry Potter, the world's most popular book franchise ever, selling more than 500 million copies worldwide, raking in over $7 billion in revenue, and creating 8 blockbuster films in the process, both to commercial and critical acclaim. Incidentally, this year has marked 20 years since the first ever Harry Potter film was released. And to celebrate the milestone, this coming New Year's Day, it was announced that the cast of Harry Potter would be reuniting for a one off TV special, giving fans a closer insight into the series that has changed millions of lives around the globe. The reunion certainly has a star studded cast lined up. Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson are all expected to be in attendance. However, there seems to be one glaring omission from the invite list, and that is none other than author and creator of the entire Harry Potter universe herself, Joanne Kathleen Rowling, or for short, JK Rowling. Now, obviously, I'm not the only one who's noticed this omission, and the internet is currently rife with speculation as to why she has been omitted. Perhaps the owl forgot to give her the invite. Or maybe, just maybe, it is because of the fact that she's been unfairly cancelled for saying that there is a difference between trans women and cis women. I can't imagine how awful it must be for Rowling to be excluded from the celebration of a universe that she created, but the organizers of this reunion event probably wanted to avoid the backlash from the keyboard warriors that have spent tireless hours abusing, meting out death threats, and trying to cancel JK Rowling from the public eye. In the name of inclusivity and open mindedness, of course. Obviously, the death threats towards JK Rowling are emblematic of a super inclusive and open minded community, right? But hey, it's all in the name of social justice, I guess. Anyway, without further ado, let's dive into the issue and get three things straight. No pun intended. The first, JK Rowling is not transphobic. The second, the medical case for JK Rowling's comments. And the third is the keyboard warriors that call her transphobic have no interest in either equality or justice, but only their own self fulfilling agenda. Before we continue, I feel that it is imperative to clarify that both myself as well as everybody associated with A Whole Lotta Gray wholeheartedly supports the trans community. Additionally, these three segments hold true even if JK Rowling is miraculously invited for the reunion event after this episode. Now, jumping into the first segment, which is that JK Rowling is not transphobic. Just so that we're all clear, here is the definition of what it means to be transphobic: an irrational fear of, an aversion to, or discrimination against transgender people. As we will learn through the episode, JK Rowling has on multiple occasions befriended trans individuals, has actively advocated for their safety and security, and has not even on one occasion supported the discrimination against trans individuals. Here is an example, however, of what transphobia actually looks like. In July 2013, the Asylum Research Consultancy reported excerpts of an interview of a Libyan LGBT activist as she highlighted the police's inability to prevent the persecution from militia. Now, many of us fear that some of the militias, by the way, this is a direct quote from the woman, many of us fear that some of the militias, which are extreme Islamists who are very well trained, very well armed, and financed, will focus on the LGBT community and hunt us down. The police is largely absent or powerless, so Libyan civil society, pardon me, has a real problem. The militias often take the law into their own hands, and guess what communities they're going to target out in Libya? Further, gayworldsnews.com reported in September 2011 that beyond the criminal laws, cross-dressing and LGBT activities at large are widely seen as immoral activities. I let you reread the quotes for yourself, but these are LGBT activists and publications decrying the transphobic nature of the Libyan government. I'm curious if the same people that cancel JK Rowling are making a hue and cry about the situation in Libya. But of course, if you're a keyboard warrior whose sole agenda is to cancel people for no meaningful reason, as opposed to engaging in substantive debate with data and evidence, I get it. It's a lot easier to go after poor old JK Rowling than the Libyan government. So now that we've established what actual transphobia looks like in the case of Libya, what exactly has Rowling said to spark this chaos? And I'm quoting directly from her Twitter here. I quote, "If sex isn't real, there can be no same sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It is not hate to discuss the truth." Now, there's two important things to note here. Keep in mind how Rowling said, "I know and love trans people." What a super transphobic thing to say, right? I know and love trans people. But second, effectively, all she has said is that there is a biological difference between trans women and cis women. Just like how there is a biological difference between men and women. Are you going to assume that somebody's a misogynist if they just told you, hey, listen, men and women are biologically different? This is important to note because sex, unlike gender, is not a social construct. This is again not me being bigoted, but hormones and genitalia greatly differ between the two sexes. Not only that, biological men and women have different brain sizes and shapes. So there are some scientific and anatomical differences that separate men and women. Believe it or not everything is a result of social conditioning. Now, it is for this exact reason that JK Rowling does not count those trans women that have transitioned and successfully undergone gender reassignment surgery, such as the case of Caitlyn Jenner. But instead, she focuses on individuals who have not transitioned and have no desire to do so despite having the means. She talks about how currently in the United Kingdom, her home country, a man who intends to have no surgery and take no hormones may now secure himself a gender recognition certificate and be a woman in the eyes of the law. Many people are not aware of this. And even then, she's not exhibiting any phobia or discrimination against such people. All she's saying is that such people are different from either cis women or trans women that have successfully undergone transition surgery. For example, if I, as a straight man, wake up tomorrow and say, hey, listen, I identify as a woman but refuse to take hormones or undergo surgery, she's saying that I would be different from someone who is anatomically and biologically a woman, either post-gender reassignment surgery or somebody who's born a cis woman. Now, if that constitutes transphobia as per you, rewind and reread the definition again and read her tweet. And if you still believe that a woman who said that she knows and loves trans people is transphobic, please, I beg you, do not procreate. And speaking of procreation, let's segue into the second segment of this episode, which is the medical case for JK Rowling's comments. Now, Hopkins Medicine, one of the world's best medical institutions, talks about how women are 4 times more likely to contract multiple sclerosis, which, for those who don't know, is an autoimmune disease that breaks down the central nervous system. And they are 4 times more likely to contract it than men. Interestingly, J.K. Rowling herself has donated some of her billion-dollar fortune towards research of solving multiple sclerosis. Now, Hopkins Medicine further states that female anatomy and estrogen levels are the prime factors in multiple sclerosis being more likely to impact women as opposed to men. Now, how do we expect doctors and researchers alike to make any sort of headway into curing multiple sclerosis, again, a disease that is 4 times more likely to impact women than men, if random men start claiming that they are women without the same female anatomy or estrogen levels? Now let's take a look at cervical cancer, which the Prevent Cancer Organization states is the leading cause of comorbidities and cancer developments among women in developing and low-income nations, particularly those in Africa. Again, how do you expect us as a global community to make headway in finding a cure for cervical cancer if random men start claiming that they are women as well, despite having no cervix? Clearly, issues such as multiple sclerosis and cervical cancer, both deadly diseases that plague women around the globe, are of no consequence to the keyboard warriors that cancel JK Rowling. Which brings me to the final segment of this episode, which is the keyboard warriors that call JK Rowling transphobic have no interest in equality or justice, but rather only their own self-fulfilling agenda. Here's a direct quote from JK Rowling, who the keyboard warriors are saying is bigoted and transphobic. I believe the majority of trans-identified people not only pose zero threat to others, but are vulnerable for all the reasons that I have outlined. Trans people need and deserve protection. Like women, they are most likely to be killed by sexual partners. Trans women who work in the sex industry, particularly trans women of color, are at particular risk. Let that sink in, right? And now, here's JK Rowling's experience on dealing with the keyboard warriors who personify equality and justice. Now, just a disclaimer, I usually refrain from swearing on my channel, but this is a direct quote, and I want you guys to hear it. Late on Saturday evening, scrolling through my children's pictures before I went to bed, I forgot the first rule of Twitter. Never, ever expect a nuanced conversation, and reacted to what I felt was degrading language about women. I spoke up about the importance of sex and have been paying the price ever since. I was transphobic, I was a cunt, a bitch, I deserved canceling, punching, and death. How open-minded from the keyboard warriors indeed. Now, for those of you who don't know JK Rowling's story, she was a single mother in the 90s with only her daughter as she'd just gotten out of a highly abusive marriage. She later went from impoverished dire straits to self-made billionaire through the creation of the Harry Potter universe, and at one point was the world's richest woman and author alike. What a story. If the keyboard warriors were truly about equality and justice, JK Rowling would be the champion of this movement. Instead, she's getting crucified for being transphobic, something she most certainly is not, as I have demonstrated in this episode through facts and evidence. Interestingly enough, this double standard exhibited by the keyboard warriors is not limited to just JK Rowling. The famed Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Adichie has also been thrown to the dogs by the same keyboard warriors for making comments akin to JK Rowling's, merely saying that trans women and cis women are different. Now, I have had the distinct pleasure of speaking at the same event that Chimamanda spoke at, so here's kind of the lowdown on her. Chimamanda Adichie hails from Nigeria, and her work involves the breaking down of Eurocentric narratives and stories to allow for the upliftment of other minority social and cultural narratives. Again, this is a Black African woman who's given multiple TED Talks on how the global marketplace is way too saturated with stories and narratives from a Eurocentric lens and how that ought to change. If the keyboard warriors, again, were truly about equality and justice, Chimamanda, like JK Rowling, would be one of the champions of their movement, but instead, like JK Rowling, has also been crucified. Now, what the keyboard warriors have exhibited and continue to exhibit is a total and complete disregard for facts, data, and civility. And instead, they resort to shaming people into submission, even if it means meting out profanities and death threats to innocent people. Do not let them fool you. They are by no means the vanguard of equality, justice, or civil conversation. They are the very inspiration for this channel and my life's purpose, A Whole Lotta Gray. This entire channel is predicated on analyzing the nuances and gray area in an otherwise black or white world, where we can collectively and freely engage with one another to devise solutions to the highly pressing problems that plague our planet. Canceling people based on erroneous and false claims and meting out violent death threats to people we may disagree with is the exact opposite of what we stand for here at A Whole Lotta Gray. To paint an analogy, the keyboard warriors' hateful agenda is the Voldemort to our movement's Harry Potter. And as is well known from the books and movies, neither can live while the other survives. Now, if that reference made zero sense to you, I at least hope you're now convinced that JK Rowling is not transphobic. Her comments are grounded in both scientific as well as medical evidence, and these keyboard warriors have zero interest in equality or justice. I am so proud to stand unequivocally with JK Rowling. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Click the bell icon to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest content. Share it with your friends and family, and be sure to comment your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Additionally, you will find a link to donate to the Trevor Project in my description below. And for those of you who don't know, the Trevor Project is the world's largest LGBT suicide prevention center, and I hope you'll consider making a donation because suicide prevention is something we should all be collectively working towards. Cheers, guys.